keep writing. Keep writing as often as you can. Keep writing until you work out what it is that people like, but also what you like, which you can write regularly.
Thank you for joining us on another edition of the Creator Business Show. My name is Chikadi Chima, and today I'll be joined by my friend and colleague, Ed Zitron. He is now writing for The Atlantic and Business Insider. He started with a newsletter, and he's been a prolific writer about macro trends. He's very controversial in that he doesn't follow the conventional opinion. He definitely goes against conventional opinion. We talk about the creator economy. Are we recodifying things that have already been done, or are we charting new ground? We also talk about how community is really essential and how technology is creating new communities and new relationships. It's a really wonderful conversation, and I'm so glad that you're with us. Welcome to the Creator Business Show, Ed Zitron. I wouldn't go as far as to say that we're friends, but I'd say that we're deeply respectful colleagues. Yes. We worked together on the launch of the Compound Protocol. I guess it was 2018, so it's been a while now, and we've been in each other's orbit for quite a while. I think you were pitching me when I was a reporter at the Next Web. That was like 2012, so we go back.
I've been married, divorced, married again since there. There's so much crap that...
Bought a home, sold a home.
Bought a home, sold a home several times.
Wow.
Moved to Las Vegas.
Does that mean it's all going to start again now that we're together in one place?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it all again next year. Jeez, never again. I can't move anymore. I'm dying here. Well, I was. I'm fine now.
Good. So Ed Zitron, you are the founder and CEO of EZPR. You are a prolific writer and a publicist like myself. Why don't you give your background? What are the relevant aspects of what I mentioned that you care about, and who are you really?
Who am I really? No, so I run a PR firm, run it for about 8 years now, been in PR for about 13 years. I was a writer before, I'm still a writer now. I have a newsletter I started writing pretty much only to get the demons out, because if I didn't write, I got kind of depressed. And so I started writing that, and then people actually started reading it, which is pretty impressive considering I was not writing it really for anyone other than like to vaguely get attention. And now it's grown into something where I write for The Atlantic, Business Insider, and basically anywhere else that'll have me. So yeah, and as far as creators go, I'm deeply suspicious of a lot of creator-focused companies. I really do not like Patreon. I feel like Patreon and Jack Conte do not have the best interests of creators at mind. I think their entire cost structure is terrible. But more importantly, I think their support. My experience of Patreon previously is friends of mine coming to me begging for help and saying, hey, support will not help me. And these are not small creators. These are not creators who are making $30 a month. These are people making, in some cases, tens of thousands. And Patreon I compare their support to PayPal. Just this bizarre black box where you don't really have the support. Patreon has upped their game somewhat there. They're desperate to keep their biggest creators because, surprise, surprise, when you're half-assing your support for years, people tend to move on. People want to move on. And I just don't believe that Patreon and a lot of these creator economy companies really offer much. I don't think they offer anything other than like a CMS and a payments platform. And if anyone finds a way to do that cheaper, they're probably going to lose because discoverability is not something that Patreon really offers. Anyway, that's how I feel. I hate Patreon. There we are. It's my entire, just kicking this off fiery.
Yeah, and it's only going to go up from here. So, taking a small step back, as far as creators go, you are a prolific writer, if I do say so myself. You have a couple books. You mentioned that you're now being published for your opinion editorials and original material in The Atlantic, Business Insider, and you have your own Substack publication, Where's Your Ed At? And you're publishing 2-3 times a week?
Usually 3 to 5, but I've actually been quite burned down. I'll fully admit a few days ago, I just hit a wall. And it doesn't mean I'm stopping. I'll probably start writing again today. But usually there was a point when I was doing 5. I had like a several week streak where I did 5 a week. And now I think it's a combination of just this very long year for everyone, but also with the fact that I had a relatively breakneck pace for months and months and months. And it eventually just got me. And on top of the fact I run a PR agency along with that.
Yeah.
But I like Substack as well. I think Substack's great because they don't purport to be more than they are.
Well, the pace of production of material puts you in an interesting spot because you're not monetizing off of content, but you're producing a lot of content. And, after we became acquainted when I was a staff reporter at the Next Web, you're quite prolific on Twitter as well and maintain quite a number of very public relationships with a lot of authors on these top publications. So
yeah,
your output puts you in unique company, I would say. So how do you think of yourself as a creator?
I think creator can be kind of a nebulous term because creator can apply to it reminds me of like 7 or 8 years ago when you had this whole maker movement. Not sure if you remember that. It was this really disingenuous thing where it was like anyone who built anything was a maker. It's like, oh, Maker magazine. And it was people like sewing clothes and doing art, which is fine. And they're both valid pursuits and they're wonderful, but they're not new. And I hate codifying and recodifying things. It's a personal thing I hate where we are seeking more meaning than is in the world. That being said, the whole creator economy, I think that I don't see myself as a creator because I consider creation and creator as something you dedicate yourself to full time. And I just don't, but perhaps I'm wrong for that. I just don't see myself in that realm because creators are more creative than I am. Perhaps is more of a judgment on me than anyone else, I think.
One of the things that I really respect about you is your hot takes. So you say you don't like codifying and recodifying things. Why don't we talk about what the dangers or the pitfalls of codifying and recodifying things are? Because that's what you see this moment as.
So I'm about to codify something while talking about not like codifying, but I think the Substack and Substack Brain, which I'll get to in a second, I think that Substack has created an interesting thing with writing, just in general. And I don't think it is a Substack specific problem, but something that Substack, through its ease of use and its ease of monetization, but also the subsequent pressure to keep creating, has created a new thing where people just come up with stuff to fill space and they try and codify something special that isn't special at all. I'm not attacking the writer in question. I'm not even going to name them, but there was someone who recently wrote something that was like, oh, you're not just feeling bad, it's full regression.
Okay.
Piss off. You just feel bad because there's stuff happening to it's not full regression. Oh, and what was the other one? It was like late night procrastination, but it was like vengeful procrastination or something because you stay up at night instead of going to bed reading stuff on your phone. And it's like, that's just using the telephone. It's not special. And what I think that comes from is this demand to always seem profound. Like you're always coming up with something new, but coming up with something new means coming up with like a new thing. Like I've invented this. And that pressure to constantly create is something that has led a lot of people to make. It's why I think you see some people like Glenn Greenwald going a bit bonkers, because there's always this need to keep the, whatever it is that engineers your audience, the antagonism in his case, masquerading as coverage of the news. And there are like Alex Berenson, his entire thing is just keeping his audience as scared and pissed off as possible. I think that you are seeing people who are writing who are suddenly having the problem of continued engagement. Like they are way more present in the engagement with their readers than they were when they were writing somewhere else. And that is scary. It is scary. Even me in this unpaid newsletter where I have approaching 4,000 subscribers, none of whom pay me. In that case, it's like, I feel this pressure. I got to come up with something good. I got to come up with something that they'll love, that will grow my user base. And I think that incentive and that drive is something that has led many writers down avenues they might not have been before. I also think the Substack and the creators and perhaps I just don't see writers as creators, which is totally invalid. They are creators. But a lot of the writers who moved up to Substack, you can really see that pressure is weighing on them. And Casey Newton, who I honestly have grown a lot more respect for. Not that I had like a disrespect for him, but he wrote an amazing thing on his Platform has been great. Platformer is a great example of how to do writing creation so well. But he wrote this thing about how difficult it was and the things he's found and stuff like people don't care about Q&As. People don't care about interviews. That's really fascinating because interviews generally do really well in other publications. And I think the Substack in particular creates these artificial pressures on people that they have to keep coming up with takes rather than thoughts. And takes in this case meaning, I have a new opinion and it's daring and out there, which is a bad place to start. It's a bad place to start, which a trap I've fallen into many times. It's like, I'm gonna come up with some spicy meatball to really engage. And it's like the moment you move into that, you are just writing tabloid journalism. Even if you write not like a tabloid, you are in the same veins. And every time I try and manufacture that, I do terribly. And it's a hard lesson learned. Sorry, I've gone completely off track with that question.
So then are those people actually creators?
Yes, they're still creators. Even if you find their work loathsome, they are still creators. It's just that I've always considered writing less creative than I think I should. Even if it is very much creative. I think it's because it's non-fictional. But it's very much still creative. Like there is like Some More News on Patreon, does a fantastic news show. Those people, they are creators despite literally commenting on the news. And I think that the term creator is so wide and much wider than they've ever given it credit for.
Okay. And then one of the things that I really like about writers who are doing profound work are their kind of tendency to test ideas first on Twitter and then turn that into a long form take. Yeah. So your tweets are quite entertaining as well. So you say you're doing this for exercising the demons in order to just stay expressed. And yet you have did the Atlantic come to you and Business Insider come to you from reading your newsletter?
Yes. And that was wonderful because it's nice to get paid for it.
Absolutely.
But also it is a wider audience. And there is, when I first started writing on Substack, forgive me that I just continually go on tangents, but when I first went writing on Substack, the hardest thing was knowing that like 30 people would read it. I had a newsletter list of 300 people that I'd grown over years just by having it on my personal site. I added them and then I just kept writing. And my general sense was, and actually also, you know the founding story of my newsletter?
I don't. Let's hear it.
I got COVID. So I got COVID. Thanksgiving last year, I made the turkey and it was like, oh, this is so good. I'm like, it's kind of bland. And then that night I was hooting up a storm and pooting my hoots from my butt that night and I couldn't smell it. I'm like, honey, I told her and said, honey, I got COVID. And she's like, no, you don't. And I got tested and absolutely had COVID. So I'd already written one thing like a few days beforehand about Farhad Manjoo had written a kind of a callous COVID piece about how all the people he'd affect by driving home for Thanksgiving and then that he was going to write down. I wrote about that and why everyone was pissed off and it kind of worked. But when I got COVID, I was like, I'm going to do this daily. I'm going to do this daily because this will be something I can do while very sick, which also kind of just talks about it. And at first it was almost like just my views on the world writ large. And then, I don't know, I just kept doing it. Like just being like, whatever, no one's going to like read this, but who gives a crap? I'm just doing it for fun. And then it was maybe around, I would say like mid-April, I wrote this thing about Clubhouse. This whole thing about Clubhouse, because I was just like, I'd started formalizing my writing. And it was actually kind of like this whole Substack thing has been really fulfilling with my writing as well. Because if you look at, as I have, what I've written, you can really see where at first I started just writing about myself and my own crap. And then you can see how I just gradually like, oh, I can write normal on here. I can find my own voice. And then eventually I just kept writing. And then like April, May, I found my feet. And it's been really interesting there because I found this remote work thing, started writing about remote work and journalism, and that's where I got the big pop. And that's about where The Atlantic popped up.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been fantastic. I mean, also it's really nice writing with an editorial team, as in having someone someone edit your stuff versus Grammarly, which I only really recently started using. But it's just easy to write on Substack that it's just something I got into. And it's really been good. It's given me something that isn't my job that I really enjoy. And the other problem is not treating it like a job, which is a natural instinct for me.
Well, so Pico is a sponsor of the podcast and alternative to Substack. But are you specifically like Team Substack, or do you think of Substack as a phenomenon and a kind of an evolution of the newsletter writing?
The latter.
Okay.
I believe that I've known the reason I have one of the best Substack domains, easy.substack.com, is because I was one of the first users. And I will fully admit, I used it and went, I was going to use this shit like immediate. But Hamish was like, why not? And Hamish is a wonderful, thoughtful bloke. And we had a few conversations. I'm like, I just don't think people are going to do newsletters. Then like a year passed and it really took off. The first one I remember noticing was Mike Isaac. And I think that Substack had two major advantages. They were really the first mover, the first one to really take this seriously. But also the way they built that platform is perfect. And I haven't used Pico, can't speak to Pico, but with Substack, there is a real tangible WYSIWYG thing to it that just works so well. And it really is just condensed the writing experience, clearly based off of use of CMS previously. Clearly someone, like when they put this together, they were like, all right, how do people want writing to feel? And it works, but also it doesn't do too much. It is not a busy experience. It's looked the same when I started using it years ago as it does today. I think that other challenges will pop up, but it's tough to move on from Substack because Substack is just so easy. Even if you control your audience, once you're in it, it would be tough to move on. I wouldn't do it, but perhaps someone would who was doing this for a living.
Okay, so what's the feedback loop look like from starting a publication, easy.substack.com? Where's your ed at? And then, hitting an inflection point where now, very well-known publishers have approached you about writing for them.
Yeah.
And then you're writing about remote work, which we can talk about in a second as well. But what does that feedback look like in terms of growing your subscriber base with much more mainstream exposure?
It was a nightmare at first. I had to push past the part of my brain which said, no one's reading this, ever. I had to kind of just resign myself to the fact that I don't think anyone, like if you go, I went back to, here we are, I'm on one of my posts from November 2020, 338 views. Next one, 138. Next one, 318. Next one, 322. I had to and I would write, God, I can't even count, but like.
You're an author. You have books out there.
I have books out there. And it's like, I had to just suck it up and just be like, you are building an audience, which takes time. And Matt Weinberger, who's a really good friend of mine and works at Business Insider, gave me a lot of advice, which was basically just keep writing. Keep writing as often as you can. Keep writing until you work out what it is that people like, but also what you like, which you can write regularly. But it was, I came from a relatively cold place, like Eric Newcomer, Casey Newton, and others who have moved on to Substack have built-in audiences. I never really had that, or at least I didn't have a reader's audience. I didn't have fans, which has been one of the more bizarre things about it. And because I have fans now, I have people who like only know me from my writing, which is deeply weird, but nice.
Because you're behind the scenes guy as a publicist?
But I don't publicize my own work beyond Twitter, and I barely, like people know me usually as a shit poster. And I'm like, it's kind of like my PR career today. If I had to do what I had to do to start my career again today, I'd fail because I'm significantly older and lazier. But now it's like, if I had to hold the pace I previously had to get going before, just wouldn't be able to do it. I'd give up.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, nobody would do what they had to do to get started if they know. Yeah. Knowing then what I know now, I would.
Exactly.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'd just be a ditch digger or something,
Yeah, I don't know what I'd be. I'd be in that ditch.
Yeah. So let's talk about your creative process then, because pretty prolific output, 5 posts a week. And it's not just any posts, it's quite analytical. You take a big picture idea and then you pull it apart. You have facts and figures. You look at, what's going on in industry. Clearly, I mean, it must serve your clients very well that you have this analytical mind. But, how do you find the time running an agency and then manage to put out high quality output so often?
You are going to find this loathsome, but I basically just, when I have time, I start writing. And if I have to stop for a call, I will. And as long as I get my stuff done, I can write. But also, I don't plan anything in advance. There are rare cases where I have an idea the night before and I might hammer it out the next day. Those are generally easier. But more often than not, I simply open a page and I start writing. I'm looking at my recent ones. So the one I wrote about there isn't a labor shortage, that was kind of in my head already, so that span out fairly quickly. The one I wrote on Monday about America demonizing labor, that took me like an hour and a half. That took me like a fairly long time to write that. It's about 2,203 words.
It took me an hour and a half to read it.
But that's the thing. I research as I go.
I imagine you're living research because you're in the flow for clients as well as
to an extent, but I don't work with many companies that have any relation to what I write, which is good because I don't like to cross the streams. It's dangerous, as we both know. But in many cases, the clients are just, occasionally I'll get clients who are like, oh, I read your thing here. I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's cool. And so like there are clients who know me as a writer now, which is good. It helps. But my creative process is basically that I sit down and write when I have an idea. And most of the time I come up with it as I go. Like a lot of people have a significantly more planned out thing. They have a whole structured thing. I do not have that. I have no plan. I have nothing. I just sit down and write. I've been told by many people this is extremely strange. Apparently most people just have a plan. They write an outline, then they write the thing, and then the thing happens. I don't do that. I'm terrible at planning. I'm writing a book proposal right now, and it's a complete nightmare. I hate writing it. Book proposals are awful. And it's the most structured I've had to write in years, and it sucks. And I hate every moment. Luckily, I have a good agent. I have good people who give me good advice, but it's still like my creative process has always been chaos. I write a lot in my head. So I wrote a 7,000 word thing about the Super Bowl back in 2015 or 16. I forget. That I wrote in 45 minutes.
Wow.
Mostly because I had most of the ideas in my head. And I was just like, oh, cool, I'll put them down now. And then I will edit as I go. But I know most people do not. Most people write normal.
So you're kind of an anti-monetization creator because you're not writing for the industry that you then serve. So you're not looking for clients when you write, and then you're not charging for your newsletter.
No.
What kind of support do you have? You said you were using Grammarly before, and now you have editorial support from The Atlantic and Business Insider.
Well, with them, when I write for other places, they have editorial support. With the Substack I literally just have Grammarly, and that's it. Because people would occasionally mail me and be like, oh, you made a mistake. It's like, I got so annoyed, but I'm so tired of that. People I've never heard from. If the first touch point you have with a creator is to say they made a typo, you're an asshole. I'm sorry. No one ever, if the first thing you say to them is, you get this wrong, that is a shitty thing to do to a creator, and it happens all the time. Like, you're not improving their day, you're not making their work better, you're making them upset. And if you have a relationship with them already, by all means. But if you don't, all you're doing is making other people feel bad. But anyway, that's a personal thing. But yeah, since I've used Grammarly, people have stopped complaining. I thought about paying an editor at some point, but now I was like, I can't. I don't write in a structured enough way, nor do I write regular in a way that can be timed out well enough to have an editor. And I don't charge for it. And I think if I did charge for this, I would hate it, because I would have the pressure of this is a paid thing that someone is paying for, and thus I have to be at this level. Otherwise, whatever.
Okay. And we were talking about that a few minutes ago in terms of people feeling like they really have to be striking a nerve all the time when they're doing this for pay. Where do you think the platforms are responsible for driving this kind of behavior amongst the creators?
I don't think the platforms are responsible at all. So one thing, going back to Casey Newton at Platformer, one thing he has done is he has not changed his beat. I mean, it's different, but he is still a guy going out and getting commentary on things from people. He's doing the same thing he did at The Verge for years, and he's great at it, and it works. Eric Newcomer, he feels like he's doing more weird investigative stuff, and he and I have had numerous public arguments about his stuff, and I probably won't bang on about that much. But back to the platform question. I don't think the platforms drive that. I think the nature of people who have not been facing the engagement wall before, now facing it, I think that is what changes behavior. Because if you are a writer who's just been writing, and perhaps you'll have an occasional thing where someone will tell you, oh, this piece did really well. Oh, if you're like Business Insider, sometimes I know in the past has had traffic. Like traffic is a big metric for them. I don't work there, and I tend not to ask my friends there what business is like, but I know they are more traffic focused. But like Bloomberg or The Verge, for example, I'm sure they had an awareness. But if you suddenly move from a publication where your only job is to write and then have to run a Substack, for example, you have just become a small business person. And that is a different pressure. Don't know if it's harder, but it's different to what you might have faced as just a writer. And that's good. It's also bad. It's also a different kind of pressure as far as cadence of coverage. Like if I had a gun to my head, I could write 5 blogs a week in perpetuity. I wouldn't have a great time, but I could do it. I don't think most people can, and I think it's very hard to keep up with or even know what the demand is when running your own publication. I don't know, like engagement does not seem to drop if I don't post every day, but it also doesn't seem to go up if I post every day. However, that doesn't mean I shouldn't. Mm-hmm. It just means more content is more content. And I think that trying to divide, I think the platforms, if they're involved in this at all, do a crappy job of explaining the why behind anything. It would be nice if Substack, for example, Hamish, if you're listening, please, or anyone, if you could say, okay, when you post on Tuesdays, you get more traction. Like basic things like Buffett, I think, does this with social media posts. I imagine there must be a way to do this in Substack. It would be nice if companies would give that kind of insight, because the one thing I will say about Substack and newsletter writing in general that I've heard from the writers who make money from this is it's isolating. No one is really saying what to do next. And Substack has their writer hours and all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, you can post on a thread of other writers. And that's just sad. It's nice, but it's sad. No one wants to do that. And having to do that is painful. It's like, and also just repping yourself. And to quote Delia Kai, who wrote these links up until recently, now she works at Vanity Fair, amazing newsletter she had. But she once wrote, I think it was actually a Substack interview, that like you have to be your own wingman. And it's true. You have to turn off the small part of your brain that says, oh, this is embarrassing. I don't want to talk about myself. Mira Gable wrote for Insider something about that as well, about how the self-promotion stuff is so embarrassing and so weird and feels gross and greasy. And I think the platforms are in a difficult position where if they start promoting one person, they have to promote everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, how do you promote? Like, what is discovery? And I think that Substack also has muddied their own waters by having people they pay. I don't know how I feel about that.
Is that their program where they're paying a year in advance?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's cool. My suggestion for it has been previously that they need to make it an independent board that decides who gets it, so that they don't give money to
friends and former
disgusting transphobes like Jesse Singal. Like specifically people like Jesse. It is not his views are not polarizing. They are anti-trans people, and he is a scumbag. And it is obvious for the world to see. And Substack gave him in advance, and that alone proves that it should have been an independent board. Like you can't make those decisions.
From a business perspective, it's very, very poor decision making.
Yes and no. I think it is poor decision making with Jesse Singal, but I don't think it's a bad idea. But you really need an independent board to decide that. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be a non-profit entity. It needs to be separate so that you don't do things like this.
So you've got strong opinions about particular, companies in this space. What are your predictions for creator monetization going forward?
I think that there is going to be a collapse of companies in this space. I think that you're already seeing it. I can't name a specific one here, but there are only so many people that can be sustained in the market. And I think that the right comparison is to payments companies and e-commerce companies and such. There's a reason that there aren't that many storefront. There are quite a few storefront, but only a few real success stories in like storefronts and e-commerce, like Shopify and BigCommerce. Shopify grew out the fact that BigCommerce sucked. The problem is how do you differentiate a product in this space? You really don't when it comes to writing. Writing is words and monetization features. And I think it's just going to be very hard for most companies out there. If someone can solve the engagement problem, they will make a lot of money. I also think that everything about NFTs is total garbage. Just total dog shit. I think NFTs in general are not good for artists. And I think that you're going to see a few of these companies pop up, as they are already popping up, saying, okay, we are going to let you mint NFTs as a creator and it'll be a way for you to monetize. And like all things like that, it will be great for like 5 people. And the rest will be screwed. And they won't get anything. And the world of NFT is just, it's a solution in search of a problem. But I think that that's how creators are going to get taken advantage of. I think that, but it's a good time to existent creators and new creators. There have never been more ways to get money out of people, which sounds bad, but is good.
It only sounds bad when you say it.
No, it isn't bad though, because think about it. Up until recently, up until like the last 5 years, if you were someone who painted art and you wanted to sell like a Giggly, I forget, like a really high-end print, what would you do?
Get an agent or a gallery, and
you'd have to find an independent printer and do that. Then you would have to ship it yourself. But right now, there's a company called like Imprint, for example, where you can just upload the art and do it. That's fantastic. That's great. That is a way for great creators who don't paint on canvas to sell art. That is a way that people can do it. And I personally have collected comic artwork for my entire life. Pardon me. Feels like my entire life. It's been 10 years. I'm 35. It's not my entire life. No, but I've been collecting comic artwork for years. And comics are something where I buy the physical original artwork.
And you're saying you can see the brush, the pencil marks, and
go and grab one from the corner if you want. But you can see the individual art, like the pencils, and that's lovely. But there are many very talented artists who don't draw on those, don't draw physically anymore. They draw, like behind me, you've got Eric Tan. Let's see if it will focus. Well, nevertheless, there's Eric Tan. All of those are Eric Tan pieces. I don't believe he draws on canvas. I think he just draws on the computer. But previously, he's had to sell through like Mondo Tees, which is a terrible website. But now, if he wanted to, or any creator would, he could just upload it somewhere and sell really nice prints without having to do any of the logistics. That is amazing. That's fantastic. If that is the net win out of the creator economy, that's fantastic. Because it doesn't cost them money to start an art business, which is awesome. The reason I find NFTs loathsome is because they are adding layers of abstraction to something that does not need to exist. Like, there is no reason, like, oh, it's one of a kind. My asshole, it's an IPFS address. It's not one of a kind of anything. Look at, if NFTs are going to work, why is Top Shots dying? Because it has no validity. And the whole NFTs good for creators thing is just crap. It's just awful. Awful.
You don't see any value in it.
Theoretically, I believe that unique pieces have validity. I own original comic artwork. I see that. I just don't believe anything cryptocurrency related needs to intermingle. I think that there is probably a way to create unique identifiers. Someone mentioned maybe it was the Beeple auction, something quite funny where you didn't actually buy the NFT. You bought the only wallet, the physical wallet that it was on. And that's actually what the ownership was. And that if it wasn't Beeple, it was another major NFT art sale. That alone proves there's no validity here. Because if you have to abstract what ownership is, you've already lost. Now, that's an artist that made a lot of money, great. But the more layers you add between the artist and money, the worse it is. That's why Substack's done well. That's why DeviantArt was and is and remains popular. That's why Etsy grew. Because the friction between the artist and the purchaser, it's just right there. With NFTs, you are intentionally obfuscating where the artist is. You are allowing counterfeits. And yes, someone could theoretically upload a fake to Etsy. It happens. But there are ways of policing that. When something is in an immutable blockchain, it is not possible to stop it at all. And it's a frustrating thing because I see this really just disingenuous push to say, oh, NFTs are for artists. They're great for artists. Most NFT art is garbage anyway. And that which isn't garbage could live elsewhere. I would much rather buy the physical thing. And if it's digital, maybe the uniqueness doesn't matter. Maybe the value is not uniqueness. Maybe it's beauty. You just have the image. That is where I think there is going to be a vast NFT crash that is going to hurt artists more than anyone. Also, NFTs are full of like taxation issues. Depending on how you look at cryptocurrency, there's just so much crap in it. There's a McRib NFT. Just who cares?
From McDonald's?
I assume. I saw it on my feed. I'm like, I'm just going to skip right over that. Or I'm going to go on a killing spree. And it's frustrating to me because it is not adding value to creators or making creators happier. It's just enriching the same people that crypto has already enriched. They've just found another place to hide and grow money.
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation I was in, is that it's a new toy to play with for people who were very early in crypto and were buying Ethereum at, $10 or $20 and are now 8-figure.
Which is so funny because they're the same people who are like, yeah, well, crypto's a way that we get equality. And no, it's a way that you personally have got rich.
Yes.
And it's offensive.
So do you think that's the complete picture, or are you looking at the current moment and now analyzing, past movements in technology and saying, likely this is where it's going to be? Like, are you completely hopeless on it?
I do not believe any NFT relation to crypto is good. I do not. I think that NFTs as an idea of unique digital artwork is an idea that has some validity, but its relation to cryptocurrency is bad.
And are you still working in crypto?
I have one crypto client. I'm extremely, extremely picky with it. And I pretty much only work with people who do stuff that's transactional. Like it's, hey, we are helping transact faster, because that has validity. Do I believe in the greater efficacy of crypto? No.
But you see in a micro sense that it's working.
In a micro sense, there is something there. The problem is that anytime you have to sit there and explain to someone why something isn't bad, you're probably already in a bad position.
Well, this is why I appreciate getting to have this conversation with you, is that you're a very macro thinker and you definitely go against the grain, but you don't just do so, like if you were doing that to drive subscription to your newsletter, then it would have a very different form than to say like, these are opinions that need to be out there. The other aspect is remote work and making, you could say making creators out of all of us. You said in your newsletter that it's making freelancers out of all of us.
Yes, I think it is. I think that it will potentially, it just mostly opens up the job market, assuming that companies accept it at scale. I also think that the whole creator economy is really just a result of the flattening of payment systems, distribution systems, which is what connects it to remote work. I am technically a creator now, despite not doing anything creator-ish. Like I haven't done anything weird or special or changed my life. It's just because there's easy access to software. If somehow I could draw, which I cannot, I could theoretically become an artist today. And it's not even a what is art thing. It's just I could get a Cintiq Wacom tablet and do it and upload it, and it could be there and someone could buy it. And maybe they would like it. The one thing I have already is an audience. And I think that is what stops a lot of people becoming creators. I think the audience building is always going to be the trouble. It's the same thing with everything. How do you build an audience with anything? How do you build an audience as starting out in a career? I think that these are all problems that everyone who becomes like a solo entrepreneur is going to face, that you've faced, I've faced. And I think you're now seeing creators facing the problems that a lot of freelancers and contract workers faced before, which is, how do I build an audience online and how do I retain it? How do I get people clicking buy? What does that look like? What do I need to create? And which goes against, I think a lot of creators moving into business are going to have that dichotomy where it's like, I want to create because I'm creative. I don't want to create for money, but I also need money to live.
And people are buying creative works.
Exactly. And it's like, that is going to be a problem that I think a lot of creators are just naturally going to find now.
And who do you see doing a good job of this? I know you're deeply invested in the writing community. Are there other forms of creators in this emerging, because it sounds to me like your view of the creator economy is that it's about connecting with an audience and having access to an audience where you'd have to do that in much more labor intensive ways in the past.
Yes.
So who's doing a good job with this new paradigm?
Well, it's a new and old paradigm. Drew Toothpaste at Drew Toothpaste. He runs Married to the Sea. He runs Toothpaste for Dinner. He did Dasher Zone. So he's someone who has been creating online for like 15, 20 years. I know because I was a fan of him years ago and I met him through Twitter. We're actually really good mates now. He is someone who has just been very good at creating and keeping people engaged by having, guess what? A regular flow of content. Not everything has to be a home run. I'm quoting Matt Weinberger from BI there. But it's actually going back to Matt's advice, which is you want to learn how to hit singles. You need to learn to just create continually, because regular doesn't have to be every day, doesn't even have to be more than once a week. Regular is what keeps people coming back. And Drew and his wife as well have an incredible output. They're continually doing stuff all the time. And that's what gets people engaged. That's how you build an audience. It isn't easy because it isn't linear. It's not like if I put out this much, I will get this much. It's usually the sum of the parts of doing this 100 times will get you somewhere in the region of. And even there, what is the region of? But Drew does a great job with that. I mentioned Casey Newton on Substack. He has done what he has done, but he also has a keen nose for what is important. He was on top of the Basecamp stuff from a few months ago. Mm-hmm. Feels like a year ago. It was not.
Yeah, I mean, we're 35% of the company left in one day.
And they did their whole, if you don't agree with our completely lack of discussion of politics, you can go. And then they did. Casey was on that. Casey got interviews that no one else did. Casey got sources. He did just a great job, but he has a regular cadence. And he is one of the few Substacks I pay for. Then again, like Ashley Feinberg, she's kind of on hiatus at the moment. I'm actually not sure what's happened, but she writes, when she writes, on the most bizarre, direct things like, where is Donald Trump right now, was the thing she did. Or it's literally just, what's happening to our former president, and just showing the kind of inane and kind of depressing stuff he does sauntering around Mar-a-Lago and the simpering sycophants who follow him. And she finds that internet minutiae and weirdness, and she's just really good at it. And what she does is she knows, she has worked out that what people love isn't the most important news, it's the most bizarre, told in the irreverent way she always has, back at Deadspin and otherwise. She does a great job because she doesn't stray from she knows exactly what the audience has signed up for, and she gives it to them. It's lovely. And there are plenty of Patreon people who do it as well. There are plenty of really good ones. At Hagelbon, Trevor Strunk, I believe his name is. He's been doing No Cartridge, which is a podcast, and he's actually released a book recently. He's been doing that, and he grinds that out. But what he's done is he's found people in politics, like leftist politics, who love gaming. And he brings them on and talks about games. So he ports their audience over, but it's not something he does in a malicious or like he's taking advantage of them. He's just knows that people are interested in them and likely what they play. And he's done a wonderful job about that. And he's really written and talked about the importance of gaming within culture and the kind of ignorance that culture has towards video games really beautifully. And he's kept it academic. He is an academic at heart. I believe he's had published papers. Need to check that. But he has still kept it within that academic thesis. He has that core which always mattered, which is we're thinking about this on an academic level in an effectual way, while also not being completely impenetrable, which is a problem with academia. It's really admirable what he has done. And I think that the existence of like Trevor and Ashley Feinberg being able to do this on their own really proves that there is real magic from this creator economy stuff. There is an ability for people to monetize doing something that isn't necessarily, that they wouldn't have been able to have an income from before. And that to me is wonderful, for all the negatives there may be.
Wow. I'm still gonna have to get to know you a little better, because like I was expecting another couple of stanzas there, but that is quite a place to pause. So there's magic in people being able to access audiences that were never reachable before because of the flattening of payments, the technology. Another one of the big movements, if you will, is around community. What do you think about community versus audience? Do you have a sense of whether this is again calling something out that is what was the term we were using before about like rebranding something?
Codifying. I'm actually with the community thing, because I think in some cases there are communities that can crystallize around stuff that you wouldn't think would. I used to be a big part of a Queens of the Stone Age forum, my favorite band. And that got me into a secret show once. Communities have validity that they've always have. That's what has made online so good. There's a lot of negatives, but the EverQuest, when I used to play EverQuest, the people who used to play EverQuest with me, those people, there's some of them I still speak to. I believe the community is something that has existed for a while, obviously, everyone knows that. But things like Discord have really made it a lot easier to crystallize and codify them in a good way. Like, I think for example, Platformer, Culture Study, These Links, and a bunch of other newsletters got together and did the side channel Discord. And I absolutely am guilty of saying it was bloody stupid at first, and I was completely wrong. I have been in that community. I'm barely in it these days, but people talk about stuff, and there are people who just want to talk about culture. There are people who, it's as stinkingly obvious as it is, there are people who just want to meet like-minded folks to talk about stuff. I am still not sure about community. Like, I'm not sure how far it can go, but I also think that while there is the negative side, the obvious ones of the incels, volcels, red pill bastards, those communities have grown, and they are truly loathsome and awful, bad for society. But there are also plenty of other communities that have grown as a result of the easily available community tools. That's great. There are people out there for basically any interest, for good and for bad. And that is a larger problem with the internet as a whole, which is there is no guide, there really aren't that many guardrails. And so you get these situations where, yeah, we can harp on about how bad racism is, because it's fucking terrible. And it has got worse as a result of the internet. that I cannot leave this conversation without saying, obviously that is bad. The good sides are, there are communities of people. I have ADHD. I'm on the spectrum as well. And there are people I can talk to about that. I can find communities to discuss with them that I never would have before. And that is really something, but also on a grander scale, it's much easier to find people who just are kind of like you. And we talk about the isolation of the internet. There's actually, this is the time when communities are growing and with positive results, and sadly some negative ones.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because now, whether that person is in Buenos Aires or Belfast, there might be that one person that is just like you, that is you may or may never meet, but you can find that person, or, that small group of people that really get you.
Exactly.
And, one of the things I think is really prolific about the creator economy is the communities that form around creators and form around content, where people are joined by, these parasocial relationships. They're joined by someone they don't really know, but there's that sense of trust in the fact that you identify with this person and I identify with this person, and then we're people, and we have a relationship and a friendship because of our shared affinity for someone. I think is a really powerful aspect of this moment as well.
Yeah.
And will I pay for that? Sure. There's definitely the patronage model. Like, I'll patronize a person that brings communities together. And
I would rather give $5 to someone that I know who does good stuff than give it to a vague organization that may eventually disseminate a much smaller payment to them.
And takes everything they know about me to keep me engaged and angry.
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you spend much time on YouTube?
I don't.
You don't. So you're mostly reading and...
Mostly reading and listening.
There's just such a bounty of platforms that we can participate in. Any closing thoughts about where you see the creator economy moving? Anything that you're particularly excited about? Anyone you want to shout out?
I mean, I've shouted out quite a few people. I'm excited by the Substack thing. I think that I was very harsh on it when it was growing. I think that, frankly, I was wrong. I think Substack's been positive. Other than Jesse Singal being able to make money, I think that it's been great. And I think it's great that writers have a way to monetize. And I think that the only negative is some people equate access to a potential audience with having one already, and one's ability to write with having the ability to make it as a freelancer. And I think, as I mentioned before, the harsh business lessons that follow will make or break some people.
And the self-promotion aspect, you said that you find it very greasy, but it sounds like it's necessary to be your own wingman or wingwoman.
You have to. It's unavoidable. And it's just something you have to get comfortable with posting. Occasionally you might DM someone and ask them to retweet. And it sucks. I hate doing it, but I'm probably never going to stop.
But then you build relationships.
Indeed.
Often.
And as long as you're not too demanding of people.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating to be able to have a relationship. Like, we met in San Francisco. You're living in the East Bay.
Yeah, I was still in the East Bay at that point.
Mm-hmm. But we had known each other even at that point for 5 or 6 years before.
Oh yeah,
we
in
met.
passing, for years and years. But now we've got much closer recently. It's great. And that's the thing. You and I would have probably never met. And now we have, and it's great.
Yeah, we got to do podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah. I just was in Mexico City to meet people that I follow on Twitter because the opportunity presented itself.
Why not?
This world is so accessible in that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So how can people get a hold of you? Not to correct your grammar or your syntax in a post, but
it's just at EdZitron on Twitter. It's EDZITRON, or easy.substack.com. And I'm very easy to find. Does not take much work to find me. You can also email me at easy@substack.com if you really want to.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.